Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Wednesday, June 4th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today is looking quite pleasant, with a comfortable high of 81.5 degrees Fahrenheit expected and the low settling at 62.1 degrees. A perfect day to enjoy the outdoors. Coming up, we'll examine the signals emanating from Defense Secretary Hegseth's absence, particularly concerning Ukraine and its ongoing situation. We'll also investigate the intriguing decision to rename the USNS Harvey Milk and what factors led to that change. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We begin this morning with a significant development in U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, was notably absent from a crucial meeting today in Brussels, marking a distinct shift in America's stance on military aid to Ukraine. Our seasoned reporter Ethan is here with details. Ethan, why is this absence making headlines?
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth chose not to attend the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting in Brussels today, June 4, 2025. This is a first since the group's creation 3 years ago that the U.S. Pentagon chief has missed this gathering of over 50 defense leaders. According to ABC News, his absence is widely interpreted as the latest step by the United States to distance itself from the Ukraine war effort.
A striking first. What explanation did the Pentagon offer for his non-attendance?
The Pentagon attributed his non-attendance, even via video conference, to scheduling issues, as reported by Politico.com. He returned from Singapore on June 1st and wasn't scheduled in Brussels until after the meeting. Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson confirmed his travel schedule precluded attendance.
For those unfamiliar, what exactly is the Ukraine Defense Contact Group?
The UDCG was established by Hegseth's predecessor, Lloyd Austin, in April 2022, following Russia's full-scale invasion. The U.S. consistently chaired the group. Member nations have collectively provided Ukraine approximately $126 billion in military assistance, with the U.S. contributing over $66.5 billion, making it the largest single contributor, according to ABC News.
That's a substantial sum. How has Secretary Hegseth departed from this leadership role?
The shift is pronounced since President Donald Trump took office in early 2025. According to ABC News, there have been no new U.S. military aid announcements to Ukraine. In February 2025, Hegseth announced the U.S. would no longer lead the UDCG meetings, turning leadership to Germany and the United Kingdom. He attended February's meeting, but not as chairman, and participated virtually in April.
It sounds like a significant pivot. Are there broader policy signals for this America First approach?
Yes. According to ABC News, Hegseth reportedly urged Ukraine in February to abandon its NATO bid and push to reclaim Russian-occupied territory. This signals President Trump's determination for Europe to assume most defense responsibilities. We've also seen a temporary freeze on almost all foreign assistance for 3 months, reported by State.gov. Hegseth's office also briefly halted 11 flights of weapons to Ukraine, though they resumed quickly, according to Politico.com.
These actions must be raising eyebrows among our NATO allies. What concerns are they expressing?
They are. French President Emmanuel Macron, according to ABC News, warned that a U.S. focus on China at Ukraine's expense risks a, quote, dangerous double standard and could erode U.S. credibility. European allies also fear the U.S. is considering withdrawing troops from Europe to shift them to the Indo-Pacific.
So was the U.S. still represented?
Yes. Our ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker, and General Christopher Cavoli attended, as reported by ABC News. Concurrently, a senior Ukrainian delegation is in Washington for talks on defense and recovery.
What announcements emerged from today's UDCG session? now co-chaired by Germany and the UK.
The United Kingdom pledged to supply Ukraine with 100,000 drones by the end of April 2026, about 329 days from today. This is a tenfold increase, as reported by KyievIndependent.com. Ukraine continues to appeal for greater domestic arms production and Patriot missiles. While allies committed over 21 billion euros in long-term aid on April 11th, concerns persist that the 2025 target of 40 billion euros might not be met.
It seems the drone commitment is a shot in the arm, but broader aid targets are a moving target. Ethan, what's the prevailing interpretation of Secretary Hegseth's absence among European nations?
Among European NATO allies, Hegseth's non-attendance is largely seen as a fundamental policy shift, compelling European nations to assume a more significant role, according to KyievIndependent.com. Apprehensions exist that a diminished U.S. role could embolden Russia. The U.S. official position, per Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson, is that, quote, the United States is focused on ending the war in Ukraine as quickly as possible, on terms that establish an enduring peace, end quote.
Indeed. Is this simply a withdrawal or a deeper strategic play?
That's the key question. Interpretation is multifaceted. It could signal diminishing U.S. commitment or a strategic move to pressure European allies into increasing defense spending, aligning with U.S. calls for greater burden sharing. Some believe it could pressure Ukraine into accepting concessionary peace terms by creating uncertainty about future U.S. support. The Trump administration's prior statements about Ukraine's NATO bid and Europe's responsibility suggest Hegseth's absence is part of a larger strategic shift. It's a geopolitical chess match.
A chess match indeed. Ethan, thank you for breaking down this very complex and important story. We'll be keeping a close eye on the ripple effects of this significant policy shift. This is story 1 of 2. Welcome back, everyone. For our second story this morning, we are turning to a significant and rather controversial directive issued by the Pentagon impacting one of our Navy's vessels. To bring us up to speed on this developing situation, we go to our reporter, Chloe. Chloe, what can you tell us about this latest order?
Grace, good morning. We have news from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who, as of today, June 4, 2025, has ordered the U.S. Navy to rename the USNS Harvey Milk, which is a replenishment oiler, and to scrub all references to the slain gay rights activist from the vessel. This decision, according to reporting from NPR, marks a pivotal moment in the Trump administration's ongoing efforts to reshape military culture and policy. It certainly feels like the Defense Department is trying to make a clean sweep.
That's quite a move, Chloe. For our viewers who might not be familiar with Harvey Milk's background, could you elaborate on why this particular ship was named after him in the first place?
Absolutely, Grace. The USNS Harvey Milk was originally named in 2016 by then Navy Secretary Ray Mabus. He designated the John Lewis class of oilers to honor leaders in civil and human rights. Harvey Milk himself was a U.S. Navy veteran, serving 4 years during the Korean War as a naval officer and diving officer before, as NPR reports, he was forced out due to his homosexuality. He later became a pioneering figure in the gay rights movement, serving on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors as one of the first openly gay candidates elected to public office before his assassination in 1978, just 11 months into his term. The ship was christened in 2021, with then Navy Secretary Carlos del Toro emphasizing its significance for the LGBTQ community, stating, and I quote, "not just to amend the wrongs of the past, but to give inspiration to all of our LGBTQ community leaders who served in the Navy," unquote. The vessel actually commenced its first resupply mission in late 2024.
So, Chloe, what exactly is the justification behind Secretary Hegseth's order to rename a ship that was specifically named to honor such a significant figure?
Well, Grace, the core reason cited for Hegseth's order is an internal memo referencing a need to align with President Donald Trump and Hegseth's objectives to, and I quote, reestablish the warrior culture, unquote. Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell affirmed this, stating that Hegseth is, and I quote, committed to ensuring that the names attached to all DoD installations and assets are reflective of the Commander-in-Chief's priorities, our nation's history, and the warrior ethos, unquote. This is according to reporting from NBCConnecticut.com and FoxNews.com. During a January 2025 confirmation hearing, Hegseth defined his primary charge as bringing the warrior culture back to the Department of Defense, specifying it as a Pentagon, and I quote, laser-focused on warfighting, lethality, meritocracy, standards, and readiness, unquote, as reported by military.com. Essentially, they want the names to reflect a very specific interpretation of what it means to be a military professional first.
It sounds like this decision is part of a larger, sweeping change within the Department of Defense. Is this renaming aligned with other recent policy shifts we've seen from the administration?
It absolutely is, Grace. This renaming is presented as the latest action by the Trump administration to remove all references to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, from programs, policies, books, and even social media. This point has been highlighted by NPR and 91.3 KVLU. What's also notable is that the decision coincides with Pride Month, which multiple sources, including NPR, describe as echoing the Pentagon's ongoing campaign to force transgender troops out of the military. A DoD guidance memo issued in January 2025, titled, and I quote, Identity Month's Dead at DoD, unquote, further stipulated that while commemorative events for Cultural Awareness Months would no longer use official resources, they would, and I quote, encourage installations, units, and offices to celebrate the valor and success of military heroes of all races, genders, and backgrounds as we restore our warrior culture and ethos. We are proud of our warriors and their history, but we will focus on the character of their service instead of their immutable characteristics, unquote. This was reported by Defense.gov.
That certainly provides context for the broader strategy at play. Has a new name been selected for the USNS Harvey Milk, and when might we expect that announcement?
As of today, June 4th, 2025, no specific new name has been officially announced for the USNS Harvey Milk. However, Navy Secretary John Phelan is reportedly assembling a team to select one, with an announcement anticipated around June 13th, 2025. That's just 9 days from now, and it might even take place aboard the USS Constitution, according to NBCConnecticut.com and Yahoo.com. The ship is currently undergoing maintenance, expected to be completed by the end of June. We'll be watching closely to see what new name they float.
This directive has undoubtedly drawn sharp criticism. What has been the reaction from those who oppose the renaming?
The criticism has been quite strong, Grace. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called it a, and I quote, spiteful move, unquote, and a, and I quote, surrender of a fundamental American value, unquote, further describing it as a, and I quote, shameful, vindictive erasure, unquote, according to NPR and military.com. California Governor Gavin Newsom also condemned the decision, stating that it, and I quote, does reveal Trump's contempt for the very values our veterans fight to protect, unquote, and emphasized that, and I quote, stripping his name from a Navy ship won't erase his legacy as an American icon, unquote. This was detailed by NPR and NBCConnecticut.com. Additionally, the progressive veterans activist group Vote Vets labeled the order a, and I quote, deliberate insult to LGBTQ troops, unquote, according to Politico.com. It's clear that this decision is not just making waves, but truly rocking the boat for many.
Chloe, is it common for Navy ships to be renamed in this manner?
Grace, ship renaming is rare and superstitiously considered bad luck in maritime lore. However, NPR notes that the Biden administration previously renamed 2 Navy ships in 2023 to remove Confederate names. So while unusual, it's not entirely without precedent, though the motivations here are vastly different. There are no specific, published U.S. Navy or Department of Defense ship naming conventions that explicitly state a wartime veteran like Harvey Milk would be excluded from being honored. Official U.S. Navy ship naming authority rests with the Secretary of the Navy under the direction of the President. While traditional conventions exist, they have evolved, and vessels named for, and I quote, prominent Americans, unquote, including civil rights leaders, presidents, and legislators, have been common, as noted by Navy.mil. So the current administration's interpretation and application of, quote, warrior culture, unquote, appears to be the primary driving force behind this review.
That clarifies the historical context and the shift in focus. Finally, Chloe, are there any indications that other ships in the John Lewis class, which also honor civil rights leaders, might face a similar renaming?
Unfortunately, Grace, beyond the USNS Harvey Milk, there are indeed indications that other ships in the John Lewis class, named after civil rights leaders and prominent women, may also be renamed. A Defense Department, quote, recommended list, unquote, reportedly includes the USNS Thurgood Marshall, USNS Ruth Bader Ginsburg, USNS Harriet Tubman, USNS Cesar Chavez, USNS Medgar Evers, USNS Dolores Huerta, and USNS Lucy Stone. This has been reported by NPR.org and USNI.org. However, as of early June 2025, no official statements or timelines regarding the renaming of these other vessels have been provided. It seems the administration is taking it one ship at a time, but this could be just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak.
Chloe, thank you for breaking down this complex and sensitive issue for us this morning. It's certainly a story we will continue to follow closely.
You're very welcome, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has seemingly lost its appetite for a controversial data demand. The agency initially snapped up the idea of collecting vast amounts of sensitive personal data from SNAP recipients, instructing states in a May 6th letter to hand over names, birth dates, social security numbers, and addresses dating back to January 1, 2020. The USDA cited a Trump-era executive order aimed at cutting fraud and warned states that failure to comply could lead to withheld funds. However, following a federal lawsuit filed on May 22 by a coalition of SNAP recipients and advocacy groups arguing the request was unlawful, the USDA has paused its demand. An official stated that EBT processors have been told to refrain from sending any data until the agency completes procedural steps to ensure it's appropriately safeguarded and meets all legal requirements. No data has been collected yet, but the lawsuit challenging the legality of the data request will continue, even as some states like Iowa were preparing to comply, while Kansas had already refused to serve up the information. Meanwhile, across the globe, the 36th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square crackdown in Beijing was met with a carefully orchestrated, deafening silence. For most in mainland China, June 4th passed like any other day, with authorities working diligently to erase the event from collective memory. Security around Tiananmen Square itself was tight, any public commemoration was banned, and internet references were scrubbed. This official amnesia has extended to Hong Kong, where a once massive annual candlelight vigil is no longer permitted under the national security law. Hong Kong's chief executive warned authorities would act against anyone threatening national security. Despite these efforts to hush the past, groups like the Tiananmen Mothers continue their annual appeal for truth and accountability. And small acts of remembrance, like candle images displayed by the Canadian and German embassies in Beijing, served as quiet defiance. Chinese officials maintain that the country's economic development since 1989 proves their decisions were correct. Turning to the Middle East, tensions are rocketing after 2 rockets were fired from Syrian territory into the Israeli-controlled Golan Heights on Tuesday. This is the first such incident reported since May of last year, and notably the first since Bashar Assad's regime was ousted in December. The rockets landed in open areas, causing no injuries, but triggered air raid sirens. The Israel Defense Forces responded swiftly, with artillery and fighter jets striking a weapons depot belonging to the Syrian regime in southern Syria. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz stated that Israel holds the Syrian president directly responsible and warned of a full response. A newly surfaced group calling itself the Martyr Mohammed Daif Battalions claimed responsibility, though its authenticity is unconfirmed. Syria's new government, led by President Ahmad al-Sharaa, condemned the Israeli shelling as a violation of sovereignty, denying responsibility, and suggesting other parties are trying to destabilize the region, a complex situation, as al-Sharaa himself had previously indicated a desire for de-escalation with Israel, but perhaps not at this price. Back in the U.S., it looks like Wells Fargo is finally hoping to bank on a brighter future. The Federal Reserve has lifted long-standing restrictions imposed on the bank back in 2018 following a widespread fake account scandal and other consumer abuses, where employees opened millions of unauthorized accounts. The Fed's unprecedented which halted Wells Fargo's growth beyond its $1.95 trillion asset level, was intended to compel the bank to address its After nearly a decade of overhauling its practices under CEO Charlie Scharf, the Fed determined Wells Fargo has made substantial progress in its governance and risk management. The removal of the cap means the bank can now pursue more deposits and expand. To mark the occasion, Scharf announced a $2,000 award for each of the company's 215,000 employees. However, some critics, like Senator Elizabeth Warren, aren't quite ready to cash in on the bank's proclaimed transformation, calling the Fed's decision an outrageous giveaway. And in Tennessee, Nashville's Metro Council might be feeling a bit tensy after an appeals court upheld a controversial 2023 law mandating its reduction from 40 to 20 members. The Small Government Efficiency Act, passed by the Republican-controlled state legislature, effectively targets the Democratic-leaning city, as it's the only one in Tennessee with a council larger than 20. Many view the law as retaliation after the Metro Council rejected a bid to host the 2024 Republican National Convention. A lower court had previously found the law unconstitutional, siding with Nashville's argument that it violated the state's Home Rule Amendment. However, the appeals court reversed that decision in a 2-1 ruling, stating the law applies to all consolidated metropolitan governments. If the ruling stands, the council will be halved after the 2027 elections. Metro Nashville officials expressed disappointment and are considering an appeal to the Tennessee Supreme Court, meaning this political tune in Music City is likely not over yet. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King, with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.